Hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. We're going to be digging in on the Kentucky midterm election results with Doug Price, co-host with the Most Dosed. Special guest Bruce Maples of Forward Kentucky is going to join us. We'll have a quick campaign corner check-in with Tamara Waiter from Planned Parenthood advocates, a little victory lap for one of the big statewide successes of last night. But first, are you ready to keep working to help turn Kentucky purple? As we'll unpack on this show, things are tough in Kentucky, but there are signs of hope. Can you help Progress Kentucky build on the hope and support the green shoots of a more progressive, more compassionate Commonwealth we can see? If you want a Commonwealth that works for all of us, join Progress Kentucky and support our campaign to turn our Commonwealth purple. Follow us on social media and share out our content with your friends and your family. Spread the word that we're tired of the GOP-dominated status quo in Kentucky, and we think our Commonwealth is truly worth fighting for. So let's go ahead and check in with our co-host. Let us know who you are, where you are, what does your protest sign say today? You there watching on the internet, you are welcome to share your protest sign as well. And if your sign is cool, we'll put it in the chat. We'll put it on the screen as we're talking about the show. So I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Childsburg in Lexington. And my protest sign says, Kentucky is still worth fighting for, but perhaps after a nap. All right, Doug, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Doug Price. I'm coming to you from Cynthiana, Harrison County. And my sign says, refresh, revitalize, work smarter, work harder.
Oh, look at you. I like that, like, work smarter and work harder. You're like, we're not just going to go with the smarter, not harder. We're like, we have to do it all, really. Clearly, the results show we got to do it all.
Right.
I feel like you're kind of accusing some people of slacking off, really, with that
Oh,
sign.
no, not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all.
You want to name some names?
I appreciate everything that everybody did to get us to where we are today. A lot of us are working together to accomplish some great things, and we just need to continue to work toward our goals of turning Kentucky purple.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you on that one. A lot of people worked really hard. There's some really great, I think, smart, strategic work. It's just like tough sledding, right? So, but as we look at the results from last night, of course, the big sigh of relief was Amendment 2, the GOP effort to strip the right to privacy or reproductive freedom explicitly from the state constitution. While Kentucky's numbers were not as impressive as Kansas's were earlier in the year, it was a clear victory for abortion advocates and those who want, women and their doctors to make their healthcare decisions, not, conservative politicians in Frankfort. So that's great. We're gonna, as I mentioned before, we'll hear from Tamara Waiter a bit about that victory and what it felt like from their perspective, the Protect Kentucky Access Group. Also, voters statewide rejected Amendment 1 to let the legislature call themselves in a special session, leaving that power exclusively in the hands of the governor. Doug's going to touch on that as well later on. The other statewide race, not as hopeful. So Rand Paul is widely anticipated cruise to re-election over change agent Charles Booker. And while I think, all signs were Booker campaigned incredibly hard, for that race, there's just some challenges here in Kentucky. Again, why do we say we want to turn Kentucky purple? Is because Kentucky is bright red right now. So other things that I noted as I was, kind of watching the results come in, some key Democratic incumbents lost their seats. So Patty Minter in Bowling Green, Buddy Wheatley from Northern Kentucky, who'd have the show, Angie Hatton from Eastern Kentucky. Looks like Sherilyn Stevenson, friend of the show, eked out another incredibly close race, this time by 35 votes, which her previous closest race had been, I think, 40 votes. So that's saying something that she won an even closer race. I think the key point in all of those races was that partisan redistricting works, right? So Republicans were able to slice up the suburbs, kind of connecting Lexington and I believe Louisville to these rural surrounding counties, really watered down Democratic votes to add to their super duper majority and lose some really important leaders. I think all three of those, Minter, Wheatley, and Hatton, like they've had some wonderful experience and were really, I think, public servants in the best possible way. And don't have a lot of hope for the folks who are coming in after them to bring that same approach to politics. So some stories that some people I think were pointing to as something that could have played a role. The story that broke I think just a couple of days ago that the KDP was sending money out of state. That was something that if you read the article, it's very clear that some of those states immediately sent back similar sums of money. So there's just some kind of I won't call it money laundering, but I think there's some, like they're playing with the political rules in a way that allow them to spend the money the way they need to, and all the kind of experts quoted in that story, say that yep, this is what they do, and it is is legal if certainly doesn't look awesome, right? When a state that clearly could use more money in a bunch of our races. I think one of Charles Booker's key message points was that he was not terribly happy with how Democratic Party politics aligned around his campaign. I think he was pretty much written off early. He was not supported by the kind of nationwide Democratic fundraising apparatus. They never saw his race as one that was winnable. Ultimately, looking at the numbers, it's hard to argue that they were necessarily wrong, but I'm sure it doesn't really feel good as if you're mounting a what you expect to be a very legitimate and realistic challenge of Rand Paul, and you don't see the same support that somebody like Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin was receiving, or obviously Raphael Warnock in Georgia. There's a lot of different reasons, of course, but ultimately politics is about strategy, and it's about realistic expectations. So it's easy to beat up on the KDP. I do think that the optics of sending money out of state aren't great, because some of those races, I think Buddy Wheatley was really close. That was a race that if he had another $20,000 to spend in digital advertising or mailings, or that's a seat they could have held on to. It was close enough. Some of those, though, if Charles had that $2 million or whatever that we sent out of state, and he could have run an amazing field campaign statewide, what would that have amounted to? 5 more points, maybe, right? So, at any rate, the redistricting was, I think, to me, the thing that really stuck in my craw as I looked at those results and saw us losing, important leaders in Frankfort, and the super duper majority growing for the Republicans. So, but I think at this point I want to hand it over. Let's see if we can bring in Bruce. So Bruce Maples, the publisher, key writer on a lot of Forward Kentucky's really impressive content. Bruce, we pitched Election Central frequently on this show as a resource for people who wanted to pay attention. But I just want to recognize that the amazing work that you do to help inform and engage voters, progressive liberal voters in Kentucky, and give them a place for good content, good conversation, good information. So I want to say thank you, Bruce, for that work.
You are most welcome, and thank you for pitching Election Central. We got some good kudos on it. A lot of people looked at it, said they appreciated it. They especially appreciated the financial piece of it, I think. And, we'll take another look at it in 2024 about how to make it better. I will tell you that I will probably be coming back to you at the end of December, first part of January, with another thing for you to pitch, which is the daily legislative updates that I send out every morning. So we'll be doing those. And if people want those, they got to come join. So, but thank you for your support, and thank you for the good work you all do.
Well, it's just a mutual admiration society here. We appreciate that. So, yeah, we'll get to that. The daily legislative updates. I do think that's one of our big problems, right? So there is a huge divide between the policies that people like and then the politicians who could bring them the policies, right? So
Right.
the fact that we saw pretty clear, strong numbers statewide, people do not want, abortion banned without exception in Kentucky. The immediate response from that clear victory and the no on two forces was Dan Cameron issuing a statement saying, "Yeah, I don't really care what you say because I'm gonna, do everything in my power to stop abortions from, happening."
Right.
And of course, the reason we were voting on Amendment 2, I think, is that, the GOP was looking ahead. They wanted something to drive turnout for Rand Paul's reelection race, because, and so they chose to put that constitutional amendment on the ballot at that election, very strategically in their eyes. I don't know that they thought they didn't think they would catch the car, right, and that Roe would be overturned, I think, in between, which then set it up for actually. I'm so glad that it was on the ballot, right? Because we got to speak as voters about what we really want on reproductive freedom in Kentucky. So.
I was a poll worker yesterday in a pretty Republican part of Louisville. For example, Deereth won the mayor's race in my polling location by a good amount, actually. But it was interesting. The abortion amendment went down in flames in this Republican area. And I saw a lot more women voting than I normally see. I saw a number of young people voting that I did not see in the primary. And I overheard a woman. Now, I'm a poll worker, so I can't have any sort of opinions, can't share any opinions, can't say anything except, do you need help voting? But I was walking outside to check to make sure there weren't people electioneering near the polling location. And I opened the door for this woman, and she almost looked like she was in tears, almost, but she was like, I've got to go vote, even though it goes against my religion. And I thought, okay, there's a Catholic going in to vote no. I'm telling you, it just now there's a map that is out there that I have a copy of that we can share if we want, or we can wait till Ms. Weeder comes along. This is the abortion amendment vote. The darker the red, the larger the no. And I just think it's really interesting where it, was voted down. Mm-hmm. And the darker the blue, the bigger the yes. This map does not have Woodford County because they hadn't reported as of when this map was done. But I just think it's really interesting to look at that map and realize it wasn't just Louisville and Lexington. It was other counties. I don't have the list of counties with me, but I believe Rowan County was one where the amendment failed, which is a little bit of a surprise. And I will just say, as long as we've got the map up, that a particular analyst looked at that map and commented, okay, Kentucky Democrats, there's your strategy for 2024. And I thought that was a very insightful thing to say, that if I was running KDP, I would put that map in a big piece of paper on the wall and start working from it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I think the no vote on the amendment was obviously a cross party. It was driven by the fact that women just aren't going to put up with it, and they shouldn't. And I was very pleased that failed. I was also pleased Amendment 1 failed. I've told this story before, so forgive me if I've told it on this show before, but there's a good friend of mine who's pretty much a political rain man for Louisville. And he was asked by somebody who had just gotten elected to the legislature, what's the best thing I can do once I get to Frankfort? And this friend of mine told him, the best thing you can do is on the first day of the session, move to adjourn. And I just thought, okay, that's pretty telling. So yeah, I don't think Democrat, or I don't think people of Kentucky wanted to give the GOP more days to mess around with us.
Yeah,
So.
not a popular sentiment, really. No matter what your political party is, I don't think anybody really wants them back there making more trouble.
Yep.
So, and I think that idea that it's just one more thing they're taking away from the governor, when it's been very clear they don't have much of an agenda besides stopping the governor from doing what he thinks is in the best interest of the Commonwealth. So definitely, those were the kind of bright lines. I think as we mentioned, the redistricting seemed to pay off for the Republicans.
The thing that is so obvious to anybody who looks at the redistricting and then at the results from yesterday is that their intention was to redistrict out any strong Democratic women. That's what they were going for. I talked to somebody with the Mentor campaign, and this person told me that the redistricting line for her district literally went around her house. It literally cut her house out from the rest of the district and moved her into a different district. She has a house on a corner, and the line went around the corner.
Yeah.
And it's just like so obvious what they were doing.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they didn't get all of them. We still have some strong women serving in Frankfort. But if the other thing, of course, is the Democratic leadership. Representative Jenkins retired. Representative Hatton got beat. So the only leader left out of the current leadership is Derek Graham. And so we're going to need 2 more leaders come January.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and nominate our friend Sherilyn Stevenson. I think the fact that she was able to eke out that win in a district that they drew to make it as hard as possible on her.
Yeah.
After shows she can win. She's got a huge committed team. Actually, speaking of strong women, Paula Setzer-Kissick, who of course, drawing a map around her house. Also they didn't want that strong woman, challenging their candidate for that Senate district.
Well, I want to nominate for leadership Josie Raymond. I think Josie is just a phenomenal legislator, smart, passionate. So yeah, I'd like to put her on the mix too.
I don't think we have a role though, do we? Maybe we can just start some campaigns though. Yeah, we could absolutely. Yeah. I think the folks we talk to are people who could have an impact. So let's see. Did you have any thoughts, you, Doug, Bruce, about that? Kind of the exchanging money, that KDB cash story that kind of broke right before the elections at a time when people were dissatisfied to some degree with how the Kentucky Democratic Party was showing up.
Well, I'll jump in here. It seems like it sends a very bad message. There were a lot of races. Why did Jeff Young end up being the Democratic nominee? If money had been spent in the primary election, then we might have had a candidate that had a chance. But that person who is, I don't know, he's pretty out there. He got, I forget how many votes, but he got votes just because he had a D and they didn't want to vote for the R.
Well, let me just say one thing on that. The Democratic Party can't spend money in a primary, right? So they can't pick.
That's right.
That's the point. That's the point of a primary is, the Democratic Party voters get to pick, not the party itself.
Yeah.
So that's on us for not being a little bit more engaged and informed in that primary. It's also the fact, and I said this before, Chris Priest, who I think is a very nice guy, had never run for office before, whereas Jeff Young had run, I think the number is 145 times, right? Yeah. So, right. It's, and it's not like Jeff Young ran a great campaign. He did what he always does, right? Like one billboard and fires off crazy screeds and dark corners of the internet. But Chris just didn't know what he was doing enough, didn't have the resources, had a baby during the campaign, right? Just didn't have what it took to really run that campaign very well. And I was going to say this later in the show. I just think it is hard to recruit for a suicide mission, right? Who in the heck volunteers to go, you know what? I want to spend a year of my life not seeing my kids as much as I could for something that is like to win a prize that then is an incredible uphill battle, right? The 6th district, we've gone from Amy McGrath, who spent $1 billion and came within 3 points, to Josh Hicks, who was, I think, a fantastic candidate. It was COVID, so it was a weird world, and Trump was on the top of the ticket, which did not help him. But he lost by a fair amount to Andy Barr, to then Jeff Young. Like, it's sad. It was, but it's challenging to recruit serious candidates for what is a very, very, very narrow prospect of winning, and that's any of our congressional seats except the Louisville seat.
But okay, I've got to say this because I've been preaching this for years. There should never be a time when a first-time candidate is running for Congress. I mean, if you have a Democratic Party, any party, that is well organized, you are identifying people who would make good Congress people 10 years before, and you're having them run for school board or city council or state rep or state senator. There's a whole different ballgame if you've won 2 or 3 elections in your part of the state, and then you decide you want to run for Congress. There's an old saying that a friend of mine told me one time about running for office. He said, there's name, money, and story. You have to have one of the 3 to win an election. If you have 2 of the 3, that's even better. So John Yarmouth had money. He's a first-time candidate, but he'd worked in politics all his life. He had money and he had name. Everybody knew who he was. Chris Priest didn't have money, name, or story, except I don't like Andy Barr and I want to run against him.
He had a good story, actually. I liked Chris Priest's story. As an educator, what his kind of ideas of engagement. I don't know.
It's not like he's got. Well, yes, but he should not have been running against Andy Barr. That's, you think you're going to catch lightning in a bottle, and it's the party has got to take the responsibility for building a bench. And
again, I'm just going to say it. It's hard to recruit for suicide missions. So yes, you should start at the local level and build up. That's for sure. And, there's a million races. I'm glad to see things like, entities like Emerge out there, recruiting women and helping train women and kind of helping them chart a trajectory to kind of electoral success. And we had a bunch of fantastic Emerge candidates on our show. Like, the last 3 months, all we did was bring on candidates to talk about them and help them share their story and their vision and why they're getting involved. And they were great candidates. And they pretty much all went down in flames too, right? It's just there's some structural challenges of winning at any level in Kentucky right now. If it's not Louisville or Lexington or Frankfort, or some of these kind of smaller cities, Bowling Green obviously should have Democrats. The fact that Patty Minter's district was redistricted, just an absolute shame. Similarly in Northern Kentucky, there's some spots where Democrats can win for sure, but it's tough right now. And so yes, the school board and yes, city council and nonpartisan races, but kind of where do you go from there, and what kind of inspires you to continue to be involved and engaged in politics when really I don't care if you've got money, name, or story. The 6th district is out of touch, out of reach for Democrats, I think, for a generation.
Well, you originally asked about the money story. I did not follow that story deeply because there's all sorts of funny money shenanigans that happen between state parties. So, okay, that's how the National Democratic Party has structured some of these rules, and frankly, how the Federal Election Commission has structured some of the rules. What I will say is this: I think KDP could have done much more to help some of these local candidates. I know some of the numbers that were, I know some of the amounts of money that were shared, and they were not the amount of money I would have shared. I'll just put it that way. They were very shy with their cash and didn't put a lot of money out into these legislative races. I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that they're storing their money for next year for Andy.
And I think that might be part of the money swapping that's going on. I also want to say that, yeah, KDP cannot and should not endorse in a primary, but people who are within the Kentucky Democratic Party, they can have a personal opinion, and they can get their personal opinion involved and their personal checkbook out involved when there's a race involving somebody like Chris Priest. I understand, maybe he should have not set his sights so high, but running against a Jeff Young, more people should have helped Chris. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think, when it became clear that, your choices were Jeff Young and Chris Priest, there are plenty of folks within the party apparatus and folks, who are established in the 6th district, who know how to fundraise in the 6th district, who could have, hosted a fundraiser or, sent out an email or made some phone calls, right? Just so that Chris had the resources to, not end up with the kind of embarrassment that we were saddled with as Democrats, right? So hard to be a proud Democrat when your representative on that ballot is clearly horrible. Annabel noted that Randy Cravens didn't do completely awful as a write-in. Good guy, well-intended. Politics were fine. Worked, pretty hard, which is absolutely like, how do you win in a write-in? The only way you can win in a write-in, I really think, is if you're running against another write-in, or you're writing in for a race that has no candidates. I think that was the 3rd county commissioner in Fayette County. But, it's just not structurally, you're not set up for success when people have to know how to spell your name and they have to write it in and where exactly they need to write it in on the ballot. So
Right.
I think, I don't even know, did they come up with the numbers yet? They were having a lot of trouble actually counting up in Fayette County the write-in results. So I don't know that I put a lot of stock in whatever number Cravens has right now as it being accurate. All right, so we should touch on Charles Booker. I think I want to get Bruce's thoughts on that, and then we can go to some of the other local races, because we are seeing a comment that people wanted to hear the thoughts on the Booker race. So I said a couple of things. I'll say, I think it would have been great if Charles had an actual field campaign, but having somebody who worked on field campaigns, there's a lot of mouths to feed on a field campaign. It takes a lot of money to run a decent field campaign. So, he had problems with fundraising, right? He did not have that kind of that moment that he had the last time when he ran against Amy McGrath, and he was the clear underdog in that primary race. At the same time, the kind of Justice, Black Lives Matter movement was happening, and he was such a clear and compelling kind of spokesperson for that moment and movement. That's it's not the same thing right now, right? So much different dynamic. I think his kind of organizational work with Hood to the Holler was significant, but not enough to build enough of a network statewide to kind of overcome that financial, just challenge. He just did not have the money. He couldn't go on TV. He didn't have the money to be on TV. Like, how are you going to win statewide in Kentucky if you can't be on TV? And it doesn't mean as much as it used to, because you can do more digital ads, but I didn't see there weren't a ton of digital ads. I don't know what he spent, but obviously he could spend a lot more in that world too. I don't know. Doug or Bruce, what did you guys think about the Booker race?
Charles is a friend. I've known Charles since, not like we are big buddies and play cards together, but I've known him since before he got into politics. I've known him when he was working on West Louisville initiatives before he ever ran for state house. And I was very frustrated when he announced he was going to run against Rand Paul. I was frustrated when he ran against Amy McGrath, not because I don't like him. I think he's a great guy. But I was sitting there thinking to myself, Charles, you've got a seat in the Kentucky House that you can have until you die if you want it. And you can play that seat and eventually maybe run for Kentucky Senate and then eventually maybe you can run. He could have run for Yarmouth's seat in Louisville and had a shot, a pretty good shot, I think. And instead he took on these two races, left the state legislature. So I was very frustrated about that. The other thing that I thought, you're right about the money. I mean, didn't come anywhere near how much money he actually needed to do that race. It was going to be uphill anyway. But I saw a tweet this afternoon that I thought was fascinating. Somebody said, Amy McGrath raised $95 million and got 38% of the vote. Charles Booker raised $5 million and got 38% of the vote. So, is it money? Maybe 38% is the Democratic base. Maybe that's what we can count on for statewide races, unless your name is Bashir. So I was very frustrated for him. I was frustrated, frankly, that all this effort was going in and I wasn't sure what he was going to do. And you're right. He didn't have enough of a field campaign at all. So I think it's very disappointing. I cannot believe that we reelected Rand Paul, but
I mean, do you really don't believe it? I mean, come on. Like at a certain point, you have the hope and the vision of a better Kentucky, but you got to deal with the Kentucky we got. And Rand Paul's got that weird, like he's an outsider. And I think a lot of people who, don't like politics, which they exist on all sides of the political spectrum, who don't like politics, like they like that. It's like kind of like why people came out and voted for Trump, who was clearly not a politician, right? They like that outsider who's just there to break things, though. My 8-year-old last night, as she was kind of figuring out what was going on, she heard Rand Paul, who was, railing against the government, right? How he's got this kind of outside and like he's gonna spend all his time back there investigating, Fauci, like what really great, and the government's response to the pandemic. And my 8-year-old's like, wait, but isn't he running to be a part of the government? I don't know if he thought that through, right? It's like he's not there to be a useful force. He's there to like just throw bombs and be a lightning rod, and not
a libertarian ideologue.
Yeah. So there was a question why Morgan had attracted so much more money. And I don't actually have the numbers in front of me. I don't know how much Morgan McGarvey raised. I'm assuming it's not as much as Charles Booker. But of course, Charles had a statewide race to run versus Morgan having to run just, in one city. So, but obviously Morgan had resources. Morgan had kind of built up his resources. And also, I think they were handed the keys, were handed over to him from John Yarmouth, right? Who absolutely mobilized his support and his base fundraising. And Yarmouth was, I think, both wealthy and also an effective fundraiser. So, it's definitely something that, Morgan was set up for success. Also, people like to give money to winners, right? I think there's like that sense that, oh yeah, Morgan needs the money because things are crazy in Kentucky and you never know. But we really very good likelihood we're going to win this seat. Whereas Booker, again, I don't think anyone believed he could really win besides him. And maybe he didn't believe and he just said it. But, so there's a little bit of that going on as well, I think. But, it was tough to watch. Thank God we have one Democrat. We've kept the status quo. We have one Democrat in our federal delegation. But, as somebody noted, Morgan's never been in the party in power, so he doesn't have expectations. Whereas Yarmouth, I think, got ruined by his time. He came into Congress not in power, but then rose. They flipped the House. He had an amazingly important job, which he did very well. So I can't imagine going like into the wilderness for another few years would have been that rewarding when he's got an incredibly cute grandson to spend time with. So, I think it's a very fitting kind of handoff. We had friends in that primary. We liked Morgan, we liked Attica, but I think ultimately Kentucky is going to be pretty well served by having that seat occupied by that politician.
Let me ask a question that probably I shouldn't ask. How much of the Booker loss is due to race in Kentucky?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer, and Kimberly's not here to tell me what it is. But what I do know is that, like, why is it that the first black statewide politician elected in Kentucky is Dan Cameron?
Oh,
Like, what in the world? Like, that's insane to me. So I don't know. I don't know how much it is to do with race. I think it has a lot to do with just, Democrats, national Democrats winning statewide in Kentucky is a pipe dream. Like, I think right now, because of structural situation, because the the and I said was going to here earlier, the politics and the policies that the Democratic Party champion are popular policies, right? They don't necessarily always run on them, but like clearly it's popular to protect a woman's right to choose. It is popular to raise the minimum wage. It is popular to stand up for public education. It's popular to have a robust social safety net. It's certainly not popular to cut it down. Yet that's exactly what all the unpopular things are what the GOP supermajority does in Frankfort. Yet we continue to kind of cut down even the size of that super minority. So I don't know what the answer is. I just know there's clearly a significant problem of connecting the party to the policies, right? If we put a minimum wage constitutional amendment on the ballot, I bet it would win, and it won, everywhere they vote to raise the minimum wage, it wins. Those same places, Democrats do not win. Yet there's no way the Republican Party at any level will ever raise the minimum wage. So yeah, somebody needs to explain to me. It doesn't make any sense, and it's frustrating as heck to watch it happen.
Yep.
All right, some good comments there. Folks agreeing that Charles maybe left the Kentucky House too soon, and that Dan Cameron had the support of Mitch McConnell, so that matters. Absolutely, that matters. But I don't know. There's just it's confounding to me that the Republicans will elect a black man statewide before Democrats do. So far,
well, I don't have any doubt that Republicans wanted to run Bevan's lieutenant governor, and I can't remember her name right the minute, and then Daniel Cameron, so that they could rub it in Democrats' faces and say, look at us. We ran a black person for statewide office before you did. Ha, ha, ha. So I think that's part of it. I think McConnell is also part of it. McConnell has a real interest in Daniel Cameron. He is, Cameron's mentor and so on and so forth. And so McConnell wants to see him advance. I think McConnell sees Cameron as having a really long and bright future.
Well, Trump agrees. That's the one thing that McConnell and Trump agree on is that Dan Cameron's the guy.
Yeah.
And now I've been very adamant we cannot talk about the governor's race, and I've done everything in my power to not let us talk about the governor's race until this race was done, because I did not want speculation to waste people's time when they should be making phone calls for Sherilyn Stevenson or Buddy Wheatley or all these people that really needed the help. But it is fascinating to watch what's going on. And I'm going to give the shout out to my old Kentucky podcast. They've done amazing work doing the kind of deep dives on the different candidates. So you can go back through their archives, listen to the one they did on Kelly Craft. It was incredibly thorough. I learned a lot about her. I just didn't think it's something we should be talking about a month before our election. So, but yeah, that if I was Joe Craft, I would be about the most pissed off individual possible, because Trump came out and endorsed Cameron like right out of the gates before Kelly Craft had made her announcement, which everyone knew she was going to do. I can't even imagine bull in the china shop Trump didn't know it, right? And I'm sure Joe was trying to call him to tell him. And how many millions did the Crafts commit to Trump for his inauguration fund? How much money did it take to get that seat at the UN and the Canadian ambassadorship? Like they poured so much money into him and his political machine, and he couldn't even hold off to not endorse in the primary or whatever. I was shocked to see that, but she kept going. She had a plan. I think ultimately, unless Trump is seriously degraded as an individual in the next 6 months, I think that's probably all it takes for Cameron to win. You know, he's a smart guy. He's probably going to run a fine campaign. And I think Trump's endorsement like puts him over the top for sure.
So I just want to mention, you mentioned My Old Kentucky podcast, which is another of the Forward Kentucky related podcasts. And if people want to go back and check out their episodes, if they go to Forward Kentucky and look under media, we have all of the podcasts right there on the website. Progress Kentucky, Your Kernels of Truth is on there, has its own page. And My Old Kentucky podcast has its own page. So people can go there and listen to them all at one place.
It's fantastic. Appreciate that aggregation and that ability to, like, you know, because I think Forward Kentucky is a great spot for kind of all your political news. You've got wonderful contributors, partnering with the Kentucky AFL-CIO to share out their content. You know, kind of all the kind of progressive voices can have one home or one space they can put stuff out there. I'm going to ask you to share our poll because, and I think we've got a graphic from that. It took us forever. It's totally unscientific, but we've got 300 people to pick which were the worst things of the Kentucky General Assembly, and we actually have the results. So we have a graphic for the results on there, Annabelle, if you can find that. No, it is. There it is. All right. So we had the top 5. Obviously, this was influenced, I think, by, you know, that conversation that was happening. But the first one, you know, the most votes was that they made abortion illegal. That was the omnibus abortion ban, which blocked abortions after 15 weeks, created other restrictions. That was before, you know, the kind of Roe was overturned, and then our trigger bill kind of kicked in. So the second, you know, most popular or least popular thing that they did was the raging war on teachers and education, the kind of how they kind of made charter schools legal and created a funding apparatus. Their inability to actually fully fund education despite historic surplus resources. The third thing that people disliked the most was gerrymandering the election maps. Of course, these are maps that many observers say are illegal. That case has still not been sorted out, but we saw the results. It was damn effective for them to, you know, get rid of some really, I think effective Democrats, unfortunately. The fourth thing was weakening our social safety net. So taking unemployment, cutting it from 26 weeks to 13 weeks. They also did a number of other things along those same lines of, you know, not supporting people in need, ending the pandemic a month early and losing a bunch of SNAP resources. So really just, you know, hate the idea of helping people in need. That's the today's Kentucky GOP. And then the fifth was cutting the state income tax and creating a plan to end it. So, you know, if you really want to see them cut the social safety net, just wait until the income tax, you know, kind of diminishes to zero, and they're going to have to find lots of cuts. So that's the kind of old adage, right? They want to shrink government down to the size they can drown it in the bathtub, and that's absolutely what they're on point to do. None of these things are popular. These are not policies that were popular with the public, yet this is the GOP supermajority's priority legislation, from the last session. And I don't think it's going to get any better in the next session. So you absolutely need to tune in to Forward Kentucky, sign up as a member, get Bruce's daily email so you kind of keep in the loop, right? And that it's worth doing so you can then share with your friends, because there are friends who have, you know, maybe issue interests. Maybe they don't really care about all the politics, but they care about certain things. You can share that with them. Like, we have got to get more people paying attention to what's happening in Frankfort if we're ever going to get better policies out of Frankfort. Of course, we have to send better politicians, and that's also proved to be quite a challenge. But, you know, you got to keep your eyes on those folks for sure. So thanks for everyone who took the poll. We absolutely appreciate it. Everyone who shared out the poll, we appreciate it. And, you know, we've got those results now, and please do share them out. We pushed them out right before the election, so, you know, it was in people's inboxes, so people shared it on social. We got thousands of folks to take a look at it, which is great. Hopefully it did kind of help some people connect the dots between what was going on back in Frankfort and who they were sending, but didn't quite do enough, apparently. Wasn't a magic poll. All right, so moving on with the show. Doug, I know you had some points you wanted to raise, so I'm going to stop talking and let you talk about some of the races you wanted to highlight and get Bruce's feedback on them.
Okay, these are just some quick election observations. David Kloiber, who was running for the Lexington mayor position, got clobbered. He loaned his campaign over $600,000. Dan Wu won. Woohoo! Dan was on our show, and I think great things are going to happen with him. James Kay won the Woodford County Judge Executive race, and one day I hope he runs for governor. The last one, we talked a little bit about write-in candidates. This one's interesting. A few weeks ago, Governor Beshear appointed Lon Lafferty as the Martin County Judge Executive. The incumbent judge, Colby Kirk, had filed as a Republican but resigned to take another position. No Democratic candidates had filed. So the decision was made after the ballots were prepared, and several people, 5 or 6 people, signed up as write-in candidates, including Lafferty. Lafferty won with 60% of the vote. The point, a write-in candidate can win even if there's 5 or 6 of them. I also heard from one of the people we had on COT. He said that he hopes the gerrymandered lawsuit results in throwing out these unfair districts and newly drawn ones. I don't think that will happen, but wouldn't that be something if that lawsuit did throw results out?
The gerrymandering, there was some of it in the state Senate map, but it was so egregious in the state house map and the congressional map. The Jamie Comer first district is just laughable. I mean, there are people in other states who are laughing at it, going, what is wrong with you people? And of course, it's because Comer has a house in Frankfort. So, we have to make first district extend all the way to Frankfort. Any judge looking at that is bound to say, oh, no, we're not going to do this. Unless they take the Supreme Court's position and say, we can't decide gerrymandering cases, which is what the Supreme Court said. The House map was, again, obviously gerrymandered to get rid of Democratic women, obviously. So I'm with you, Doug. I don't think it will happen. I think it would be hilarious if it did. I just want to see what comes out of it in terms of the people who are serving. I mean, if you put the maps back, what then? Do you move everybody back into their seats? I don't know. I don't know what happens. But yeah, I'd like to see that happen. The write-in thing, I would like to point out, for all write-in candidates who ever want to have a hope and say, yes, it can be done, don't forget that Murkowski in Alaska won as a write-in. So,
I think that's a unique situation. I'm just gonna say.
Well, sure.
Keep hope alive. But if you're a sitting senator and you run as a write-in candidate, you can pull it off. Also, Alaska is very comfortable with crazy politics.
Obviously.
One thing that is, lovely to see out of Alaska, I know this is not on the run of show, that Palin lost for a third time. So in the span of not very many months, she lost that House race once again.
We have a comment in the comments. Well, that's where the comment would be about Mr. Swan.
Oh yeah, he launched his campaign. He came on Kernels of Truth quickly. He got that Kernels of Truth bump and bounce, and sky was the limit for Lamine. Obviously, because because he's a smart guy, he's a compassionate guy. He worked really hard. He hired or recruited a great team. Annabel Nagel is a little bit biased, so I don't know if we should listen to her because she was Team Lamine all the way, and they did a great job for sure. Again, like, I don't want to go out of my way to pile on the KDP, but like, hey, look, here's a new district, and oh wait, there's no one. There's no one running. It's a Lexington district that absolutely is favorable, and Lamine's like, okay, I'll run if no one else is going to. Not recruited, not like certainly not groomed to be this. He was somebody who like cut his teeth on doing politics though, and running field campaigns and cared passionately, and I think he's doing wonderful back in Frankfort. But I'm so glad that he, looked around and realized that no one else was running, and threw his name in. Are there other races like that we've forgotten? I'm sure there's a lot of them, but I just want to recognize like all the great candidates who worked so hard, right? We had some wonderful candidates on this show. Tommy Adams, for the Clark County, and just Clark County and some Fayette. Worked his tail off. Great candidate, running against just a joke. Yet, again, those kind of bright red county, not favorable to Tommy. I hope that he stays in politics, stays involved, and runs for something for sure. We also Chuck Eddy. We should acknowledge that. I was really excited with the early results because Chuck Eddy was leading, and in that Senate race that that he worked again incredibly hard, and a very compelling personal story. Former Republican, the party left him, and had to do what he could. So yeah, I was glad to see him have some success. Disappointed that he couldn't pull it out, but again, the structural challenges. These are some very, very, very uphill districts. They were not drawn to be competitive. They were drawn to be Republican. And to see people running hard, is just, I think it's inspiring for sure.
Can I mention a couple of the judicial races?
Oh yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah. The Kentucky Supreme Court race between incumbent Michelle Keller and Joseph Fisher was won by Keller, who garnered 55% of the vote. Fisher is the one who openly campaigned for a nonpartisan race as a conservative Republican. He got in trouble, so what did he do? He filed a suit. I don't know if he'll file a suit now to try to overturn an election that he lost. The other race I want to mention, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, incumbent Philip Shepard.
Yes.
It's the Republican legislators have long felt that Shepard rules the wrong way, so they wanted to take him out at the polls. He beat challenger Joe Bilby, who is the attorney for the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. Multiple millions of dollars were spent on this race by the candidates, including outside money on both sides.
Yes.
I calculated that the candidates spent approximately $40 per vote, as there were just under 18,000 votes cast in this race.
Wait, say that one more time. How much? How much per vote?
$40 per vote. I think they spent a combined total of 600,000, something like that.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, a lot of dark money coming into those races. Really just sad to see, but so heartening to see them all go the right way, right? So, dark money didn't win the day in that case, for sure. And that's, obviously really important looking forward, to how are things going to be ruled on in terms of abortion. And, Fisher was absolutely gunning for that issue when he threw his hat in to run for the state Supreme Court. So glad to see his ghost campaign not be effective. Go ahead.
I think we should also mention the turnout. Turnout was nuts. I think that the Secretary of State's office says they think it's going to be about 50%, which for a midterm is nuts. And I had one commentator on our site whose story is up, Ken Wolf, who said, I don't think that we've got a blue wave or a red wave. I think we might be seeing the beginning of a democracy wave where people are realizing that if they don't go vote, they could lose it. So
I think there's a lot of people who are critical of Biden for kind of sounding that call and, kind of running that message with a couple of major speeches, but, people aren't paying attention. I say, why do you think Trump gives the same speech at every rally? It's not really a speech, it's like the same airing of his list of grievances. Right. People aren't really paying that close attention. They want to hear the hits and they like, some of those points. But, I think keep making the point about democracy being in jeopardy because it's still true. And it clearly did resonate with some folks. And people are like, well, it isn't polling very well, but what's a poll worth these days? I don't think that turnout, was captured in the polling. I think the kind of youth enthusiasm, concern about abortion access, these are things you cannot really poll for because no one answers their phone anymore.
Right.
So the polls are just not nearly as valuable. I think, but the only poll that matters is the result on election day, and that's where I think saw some very hopeful signs. The democracy wave, I like that idea a lot. Doug, what do you got?
Yeah, I want to say, and I don't doubt the Secretary of State. I'm certain he is more knowledgeable about this than me. But according to the State Board of Elections, there were almost 3.6 million voters registered as of October 17th, 2022. The highest vote total I found was the Paul Booker race, with total votes cast of right at 1.5 million, which means that approximately 41% of we the people voted. So I question whether that 50% is accurate, unless there were a lot of people who registered to vote in November.
See, I think that what you've got is some people didn't vote in the Senate race, believe it or not.
Okay.
They went and voted for judge executive or, whatever. So let's wait and see. I agree with you that's a little funny if that's the highest vote total you found, because it's not even close to 50%.
Yeah.
But there is also the thing of how many people voted that didn't vote in that race. So we'll see.
That's true.
I do know that the place that I was a poll worker, we were, except for maybe the last hour, we were busy all day. And in fact, at one point, we had people standing in line to vote, pretty significant line. So yeah, it was pretty good turnout for a lot of places.
Yeah. So I think we're going to need to wrap up. Tamara Wider is not joining us tonight, apparently. I will harangue her to get her next week. She's probably getting that much deserved nap. I know if we go too late, Annabelle is going to, stop producing the show and just go to sleep. So we should probably try to wrap up. I just want to say, Bruce, thanks for joining us. Again, thanks for the work you do. Everyone needs to check out Forward Kentucky and, sign up, become a member.
May I do a quick plug?
Of course.
If you just can't get enough election analysis on moving Kentucky forward, tomorrow I'm interviewing Robert Connie to see about his number crunching. So check that out.
He's good with the numbers. He's not just gonna be like his gut take on things. He's gonna have actual data to share with you. So you should definitely
probably
check
maps to go with him.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Cool. And folks, I'm not kidding around. You deserve a rest. If you don't feel like you deserve a rest, then think about that and do some introspection. And maybe the next election, which will be trying to hold on to Governor Andy Beshear, maybe you can step it up a little bit more. As Doug said, maybe you do need to work harder. I don't know. We definitely need to work smarter. We need to be, inspired by what we can do. And I think, we should be inspired, looking away. Like, we stopped two bad ideas from being written into our Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Way to go. Like, again, people get the issues. We just have to figure out ways to connect those issues to the politicians that can deliver for those issues. And let me know, put in the comments issues you think we should dig in on between now, and the kind of the legislative session. I know we're going to cover medical marijuana. That's a given. We're going to have some folks on for that story. That's a really important one. And if you have specific representatives or advocates you think we should talk to, let us know. But I think Nima's going to hook us up with some folks from that advocacy effort. But yeah, I think there's other ones we'll be checking back in with labor for sure. Probably have Matt Alley on. He does a great job of kind of distilling what's going on in the labor movement. But yeah, other issues. We've been so focused on the election for the past few months. We've kind of let slide everything else. So yeah, please let us know what you think we should be covering. So all right. So thanks again. I think we're just going to go ahead and close out the show. Doug, do you have any? Do you want to do the kind of final comments?
Yes, I'll close out the show. I just want to say thanks again for our guests tonight. You do an amazing job, and I don't see how you get everything done. We're back next week, probably. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State, organized as a 501c4, is affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance Voter Engagement, commonly referred to as CAVE. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Production this evening was by the lovely and talented Annabel Nagel. And thank you, Nate, for the theme songs. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com. If you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook, don't worry. You can rewatch shows and see our source links on Facebook, or audio podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media. More information can be found at couchfiremedia.com. We appreciate everybody who joined us tonight, and spread the word about Progress Kentucky. We're here to help turn Kentucky purple, and we hope to see you with us next week. Good night.